Hey, this is Travis. We are going to be reviewing Bitcoin. This was the first blockchain ever, and it's specifically for product designers. So we're not going to get into too much technical detail. I'm just giving you an overview of Bitcoin so you can understand where blockchains originally came from. So Bitcoin has a very interesting past. It was released sort of out of thin air by an anonymous individual named Satoshi Nakamoto. So Satoshi released a white paper that described what he had envisioned for Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. He released this in 2008. And again, we don't know who Satoshi is. It's this anonymous figure. This is a pseudonym that he uses on the internet. And he talks about disintermediating financial institutions from a digital currency. Right now, if you move US dollars between people online, you are relying on banks and other financial institutions to clear this money. And Satoshi thought about disintermediating these financial institutions, and this was sort of the genesis of Bitcoin. Now let's talk about what a blockchain actually, or what Bitcoin actually is. You can think of Bitcoin in several different layers. So the first, most basic layer is that Bitcoin is open source software, as I just said. This is a GitHub repository for something called Bitcoin Core. I could download this to my computer, and when I start running it, my computer becomes a Bitcoin node. It joins the Bitcoin network, which brings me to the second way that you can look at Bitcoin, which is that it's a network of Bitcoin nodes running the open source software. So you can see here that there are over 15,000 nodes globally distributed that are currently running the Bitcoin software. And the Bitcoin software, without getting into too much technical depth, it describes how it encodes how the nodes need to communicate and collaborate with each other in order to keep the blockchain running, in order to secure it from attack. So we'll get into a little more detail later on. I don't want to get into too much technical depth though, because this is more of a computer science topic, distributed systems and networking and all that. But just understand that anybody around the world can download this open source software to their computer. They can run it, and then their computer will join as a node in the Bitcoin network and will be working to maintain and secure the Bitcoin network from attack, to continue it and perpetuate it into the future. Now, the third and last thing that Bitcoin is it's a blockchain. And a blockchain is just a specific data set of all the transactions that have ever occurred, right? So in previous videos, I've showed what a blockchain actually looks like. If we zoom in here, right? This could be your computer running a Bitcoin node, and clients send transactions to these nodes, and the nodes assemble the transactions into blocks and then propagate the blocks throughout the network of nodes. Now, I don't want to get into detail here, but just understand that in 2009, the Genesis block for Bitcoin was started. And ever since then, it's built up block by block every 10 minutes. And this is how the Bitcoin blockchain is updated. And so a blockchain is just a specific data store that each node on the Bitcoin blockchain holds. It holds its own copy of it. So blockchain is a data store, and we can see here on this block explorer of Bitcoin all of the blocks that are coming in. So right now Bitcoin is at a block height of 732,706 blocks. It occurs roughly every 10 minutes, a new block is created, and you can see that each block is about 1.4 million bytes worth of information. This is it is a data store, That is what a blockchain is. And just to give you a little more background, whenever you start running the Bitcoin software for the first time and join for the first time as a node into the Bitcoin network, then your computer asks the other nodes in the Bitcoin network for this blockchain data set right here. And from the other nodes, you receive the blockchain data set to get up to date on download the entire blockchain onto your computer, which is around 400 gigabytes right now. So it's an extremely large file because this thing has been running for roughly 13 years. So those are the three ways that you can think about Bitcoin. It's open source software. When you download and run the open source software on your computer, you become a node on the Bitcoin network. So your computer is now being used to maintain the Bitcoin network. And when you run this software, when you become a node, you are storing a copy of the entire Bitcoin blockchain on your computer. And this is what makes the Bitcoin blockchain decentralized, because every one of these nodes, these 15,000 nodes around the world, has a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. So I've showed you how the Bitcoin blockchain is distributed. It's decentralized across global nodes. This is good. We can understand that if some of the nodes go down, that the other nodes will still have a copy of the blockchain, so the blockchain will persist. But how does the blockchain get updated every 10 minutes? How do we decide which node gets to update the blockchain? Because if only one node or only several nodes had the right to update the blockchain every time, if they had the unilateral privilege to update the blockchain, say that these are the transactions we're going to include in the next block, these are what the transactions are, it would defeat the purpose of decentralization. It would just become a centralized database, just like Visa has total control over what passes through its system. So we need a decentralized way for these nodes to collaborate with each other and update the blockchain at the same time and in the same way. And what we come to is something called proof of work. This is one of Satoshi's major innovations that he added to create the Bitcoin blockchain. Essentially, what it is, it's a very deep topic, but the nodes spend massive amounts of energy and computing resources to solve a puzzle so that they can win the privilege of creating the next block. So every 10 minutes, estimated, right, or approximately, a node is going to solve this puzzle, and then it's going to be able to create another block because of it. And they spend all this electricity and tie up their computing resources, because when they create the next block, they get Bitcoin reward paid to them. So that's the financial incentive for spending all the electricity in order to create the block in the first place. Now, I want to show you that this is one thing that Bitcoin is criticized for, its proof of work consensus mechanism, because there are thousands of nodes all across the world with these specialized hardware setups that are constantly trying to solve these puzzles so that they can win their Bitcoin reward. And so right now, the energy consumption of Bitcoin, is 204 terawatts per year, which is the equivalent of the annual electricity spend of the entire country of Thailand. So we're not talking about an insignificant amount of electricity. They're saying that the carbon footprint is this much CO2 per year. So people are criticizing Bitcoin for its not being really environmentally friendly. This proof of work algorithm is called a consensus mechanism, and consensus mechanisms are really important for the technical design of a blockchain. It's what secures it's what makes it's what gives the blockchain the ability to update in a decentralized way, and it prevents outside attackers from coming in and screwing with the blockchain and updating it with false records and all of that we won't get into. So again, a consensus mechanism, it's a very technical computer science topic, but I just wanted to show you sort of what Bitcoin is using in the background. And then all of the blockchains that we're going to talk about later on have their own consensus mechanisms. So it could be one of the most important factors when comparing different layer ones. I'll stop there. So Bitcoin is a blockchain, and the blockchain is made up of blocks that have transactions that send Bitcoin from one wallet address to another. So I just clicked into a block here, and we see that 0.0127 Bitcoin went from this wallet address to these wallet addresses. But you may be wondering how Bitcoin, this abstract, virtual, digital currency, could be worth $41,000, $41,586 per Bitcoin. And to understand this, to understand why people are willing to pay that, why it has real world value, you have to understand something called tokenomics or token economics. This is the monetary policy behind Bitcoin. Here it is for Bitcoin. This is probably the most important thing to understand about Bitcoin, is that it has a fixed supply of the amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist. So encoded in the Bitcoin software, it says that there will never be any more than 21 million Bitcoin ever to exist. So starting in 2009, this is the issuance of Bitcoin from the beginning all the way to up to its 21 million hard cap right here. We see that, in the first several years, 11 million Bitcoin was mined or was created or issued. And then this rate decreases every 4 years, boom, boom, boom. And then sometime in the year 2140, the 21 millionth Bitcoin will be issued, and nodes are not going to change this. This will never change for Bitcoin, and so no one can ever mess with the total supply of Bitcoin. And this fixed supply creates something called scarcity. And scarcity it's fundamental to why humans value things. If something is finite and it is rare, then it has value. It's almost proportional in this way. So let's juxtapose Bitcoin with a 21 million Bitcoin hard cap to the US currency. So the US just in the year 2020 printed $3.38 trillion, which was 20% of the supply of the total circulating supply of US dollars at that time. So that means just in 1 year, the supply of the US dollar increased by 20%. And there's no hard cap on the US dollar. The Federal Reserve can print as much, they can issue as many US dollars as they want. So there's really no such thing as scarcity when it comes to the US dollar. There's no fixed supply on it. And if demand stays the same for something, but supply increases, then the price goes down, or the value of that good, service, or currency goes down. And this is why people say that the US dollar is being devalued, which can lead to other things in the economy like the inflation of goods and services. If you have more US dollars, then actually what you could be doing is you could be increasing the cost of goods and services in the economy. This fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin is why Bitcoin is considered a store of value. This is the main investment narrative around Bitcoin, and it's why people assign real world value to it. It's at least one of the reasons why. Because the idea of scarcity has always been scarcity and value has always been with us in society. Many of the currencies and assets that we've used in the past have been scarce. Like, let's think of gold. There's just a finite amount of gold. It's somewhat rare on this earth, and therefore we assign a lot of real world value to it, even though there's really not much utility in gold in the first place besides making jewelry out of it. But there's not really any industrial utility to it. Still, it's a store of value. It's considered a store of value. So when you get US dollars, you can convert it into gold, and that gold maintains its value across time. Better, at least, than the US dollar. There's still a problem with gold, though, that gold is inflating at 2% per year. Michael Saylor estimates that the US dollar is going to inflate at around 7% to 20% per year. So 2% inflation per year, You lose the value of your money after 36 years, 15% inflation per year. You lose the value of your money over over 5 years. This is Michael Saylor's thought experiment for how can you transfer money across a 100-year time window. You need an asset that doesn't inflate at all. Over this long time span, you can't have any inflation. Otherwise, it's really going to deteriorate the purchasing power of your asset. And he thought of other things: gold, real estate, commercial properties, obviously fiat. He ruled out pretty quickly, but he came to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the only asset in the world where it's possible to convey value over 100 years without getting inflated away. Now, this isn't financial advice. Really, this is just for educational purposes to explain how this digital currency could have value, and the investment narrative around it is a store of value. So this is what Bitcoin has been valued at up until now. It really hasn't been used too much as a currency at this point. There aren't a lot of retailers who are accepting it to buy, to sell goods and services on a day-to-day basis. This could change with something called the Bitcoin Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the layer 1 blockchain, and the Lightning Network is layer 2, which makes things faster and cheaper to send microtransactions and all of that. We won't get into that here, but I just wanted to explain that Bitcoin is considered a store of value, and institutions are starting to buy Bitcoin. This is why Bitcoin is more of a conservative layer 1 blockchain than the others that we're going to talk about later on, because it has a very specific use case, and now the network is worth $1 trillion. So any software upgrades to Bitcoin that could undermine its security or would compromise it in any way is scary for a lot of people. It's worth a lot of money now. So it's conservative in that there's really lengthy review processes to do any updates to Bitcoin, and people really aren't trying to innovate heavily with the layer 1 blockchain. They want it to stay the same because it's worked for 13 years, and it appears that it will continue to work just fine into the future. Therefore, Bitcoin is more conservative, I say, than other layer 1 blockchains like Ethereum and some that we're going to talk about later on. These others are really pushing the limits in terms of what we can do with smart contract blockchains and creating Web3 ecosystems. So that's Bitcoin in a nutshell. We talked about how it's an open source software, it's a network of nodes, and it's also a blockchain data store that tracks the movement of Bitcoin cryptocurrency between different wallet addresses. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the next evolutionary stage in blockchains, which is, if you will be patient, is Ethereum right here. This is the first smart contract blockchain launched in 2015, and we'll talk more about it in the next video. Thanks.